Hey, what's up? It's Phoenix and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I encourage you to hit that like button, to subscribe for more quality content, and to share with your friends. I also encourage you to check out the playlist tab for more videos and to check out my books from my author page. I'll put the link in the description. So today I'm very excited because I'm going to talk about Epicurus and Epicurus's philosophy. And so without further ado, let's dive right in. This is part of my Philosopher series. You can find other episodes in this series on the playlist tab, so be sure to check that out. So, what can I say about Epicurus? Epicurus. There is much that can be said, and Epicurus is a very interesting philosopher. Epicurus was a materialist, which was in stark contrast to the Platonic theory, particularly with forms and with the ideas. So the contrast between Plato and Epicurus deals with Plato's notion of the forms and of things being abstracted and more spiritual, while Epicurus is very much grounded in the world as we see it in the physical world. And he explains things by way of atoms as part of his theory of existence and his theory of the world. And he's a very interesting philosopher. He also has a moral philosophy, which is what I want to talk about today, and I'm very excited to share Epicureanism and the moral philosophy of Epicurus. So, what is a good way of life? As we know, Aristotle has been thinking of the good way of life, and so have other philosophers. What is a good way of living life? Epicurus seems to want to simplify things very much to their basics, and so his philosophy might be a little bit simpler in terms of this idea of what the good life is, at least when compared to Aristotle, but it's done in a way that is scaled down and is less abstract, and I find that to be very interesting formally, and it's definitely an interesting way of presenting a philosophy about the way of life and about a good way of life. One of his first claims is that we should not fear death. Death is the cessation of life, and it's the cessation of our awareness, but this is not anything to fear, and it definitely makes sense when thinking about this, because we don't really understand death as it is, so there's really no reason to fear death at all. Everything comes and goes, it waxes and wanes, and in Epicureanism and in Epicurus' philosophy, we can respect that death does not have much of a hold over us as we would like to think that it does. Now, in terms of the moral philosophy that Epicurus espouses, he's very much into moderation and balance. And balance and moderation are very important concepts to Epicurus when thinking about life. And this is very interesting to think about in general, with thinking about how the good life is very natural, organic, balanced, and good, and focusing on the goods that we can enjoy in life. Unfortunately, Epicurus has been seen as a hedonist, as seeing someone who only believes in pleasure, but actually this is not true if you read his texts, because you realize that he's talking a lot about balance, and he's talking a lot about enjoyment and moderation rather than just rampant enjoyment and just doing whatever you want and following whatever whim you desire. It seems that Epicurus very much cares about a balanced life, and this is why he philosophizes the way that he does. He thinks that there is much that can be enjoyed in life, and that enjoyment is good, but that doesn't mean that that is the only good and that is the only way that we can live. So part of that philosophy then is to emphasize the good things in life. What can we enjoy in life? What can we enjoy in terms of pleasures, in terms of goods, in terms of good itself? And so it seems that there is a little bit of similarity with Plato and Aristotle, because Epicurus is focusing on how good and things that are good can make our lives a lot better. And so it's very interesting to think about that. In fact, when people say that Epicurus is hedonistic, it's actually much more complicated when thinking about how he talks about nothing in excess, he says about him saying that every pleasure is not a pleasure worth seeking, and he has this very beautiful passage where he talks about how we don't have to have luxurious dinners. We don't have to have luxurious meals. We don't have to live a luxurious life. the simpler that we keep it, the better. He highlights the notion of bread and water as being good enough to fill us up and to keep us content. And this is another example of his simplicity in life and keeping things very simple. It really is interesting when thinking about his notion of nothing in excess, because often in life we do carry things to the extreme. We do want excess. I mean, even if we think about the way that we live in our consumerist society, it is everything in excess, everything in too much. But for Epicurus, we need to simplify it. We need to scale down. And this is not a bad thing at all to be able to keep things simple. It can actually make things even more enjoyable. And so this is a very powerful way of going about life, with thinking about these kinds of things. Also, Epicurus is thoughtful. He's not into impulsivity. He's not into doing things too much on a whim or doing things just because we want to. And again, there is a notion of responsibility in these kinds of ideas. And so this is something to definitely keep in mind. I also am moved by Epicurus's notion of not every pleasure as being worth seeking. And this is very important as well for thinking about how pleasures are not always good, or the good that we think that they are, if they are in excess or if we are chasing them down at the expense of everything else. Certainly that is not helpful. And so every pleasure is not necessarily something that we should seek. And so this is evidence again that Epicurus is not just strictly hedonistic. So what can I say about Epicurus as a lover of philosophy and as a lover of life? What can I say about his ideas? Well, I think they're very interesting. I think he goes into a lot of notions, as I've said, of balance and keeping things kind of restored and keeping things level. And I think this is very important. While I wouldn't necessarily want to focus too much on materialism and the physical world, even though materialism is a great method for science and with thinking about the physical world, I am a little bit moved by Plato as a contrast of thinking about the ideas of abstractions, of forms, and thinking about how life is richer than just our physical world and the things that we immediately see. But I do like his notions of balance. I like his notions of enjoyment of life. Certainly it is opposed to my own view of life in many ways, where I put too much emphasis, I think, on discipline and work and all of these things. But there is something to be said about enjoying life and allowing ourselves to enjoy life. And I think that that is a very powerful notion. So it's definitely something to keep in mind, that we should work hard, we should have discipline, we should do good things, but we should also focus on the beauty of life and the beauty of enjoyment and the good that we can experience by way of pleasure, and by not taking anything into excess. I think these are very valuable principles, and I think it's easy to take them for granted in a world that might push us to extremes and push us to excesses. And so, as I've said, Epicurus definitely focuses on notions of balance, and I think that this is very valuable to keep in mind when we can get carried away by a variety of things that may not be in our best interest. And so, I definitely like these ideas. I also think that it is important that we emphasize that Epicurus is not hedonistic, because I myself would not want to live a life where I am chasing every pleasure, where pleasure is all that I care about, where I don't have discipline, where I don't have a desire to help other people, where I don't have a morality to the things that I am speaking of and the things that I am experiencing. And so I definitely think it's important that I keep that in mind. I like Epicurus in the history of philosophy, and as you can tell, as part of my Philosopher series, you've seen a lot of different perspectives, as I described a multitude of perspectives. But I do think that this is one of the beautiful things of philosophy, which is that there are different perspectives to consider, and that we can weigh these things by way of our own rationality, and we can decide what is best for us. And so yeah, thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you will check out Epicurus for yourself, and check out the other philosophers that I've talked about on my Philosopher series. And I very much thank you for stopping by. There will be much more videos to come, so keep a lookout. This is Phoenix, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.